The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another rut in the road, nearly sending Josephine Jameson tumbling from her seat. At 6 feet tall, she had nowhere to fold her long limbs in the cramped compartment, and her knees pressed painfully against the wooden bench opposite. Her fellow passengers, a banker and his wife, had been stealing disapproving glances at her height since St. Louis. Now, 3 days into their journey to White River, Colorado Territory, in the autumn of 1875, their curiosity had finally overcome their manners. "My dear," the banker's wife whispered loudly enough for Josephine to hear, "do you suppose any man will want such a statuesque bride? Poor thing traveled all this way." Josephine pretended not to hear, focusing instead on the weathered copy of Wuthering Heights in her lap. At 22 years old, she had grown accustomed to such remarks. In Boston, her height had marked her as an oddity, a spinster in the making. When her parents died of influenza, leaving her penniless and alone, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride had seemed her only option. The banker's wife leaned closer to her husband. "I hear Mr. Blackstone specifically requested a petite wife, someone delicate. What a terrible misunderstanding." Josephine's stomach knotted. The woman was likely right. No man wanted a wife who could look him in the eye. She smoothed the wrinkles from her gray traveling dress and straightened her spine. Whatever awaited her in White River, she would face it with dignity. The stagecoach finally rolled into town as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the main street. White River was larger than Josephine had expected, a proper town with a hotel, general store, and several saloons. Men and women paused in their activities to watch the stagecoach arrive, their gazes inevitably landing on Josephine as she unfolded herself from the carriage. "Good Lord," someone muttered, "she's tall as a pine tree." Josephine lifted her chin and retrieved her trunk with as much grace as possible. A small, balding man approached, consulting a pocket watch. "Miss Jameson?" he asked, eyebrows rising as he took in her full height. "Yes, sir." She extended her gloved hand. "You must be Mr. Blackstone." He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Howard Blackstone, yes, town banker." His eyes darted around nervously. "There seems to be some confusion. I specifically requested, that is to say, a petite bride," Josephine finished for him. "I understand, Mr. Blackstone. The agency failed to mention my height in our correspondence." "Indeed." He tugged at his collar. "Most unfortunate. I'm afraid this arrangement won't be suitable." Despite anticipating rejection, the words stung. Josephine swallowed hard. "I see. May I inquire where I might secure lodging until I can arrange return passage?" Before Blackstone could respond, a deep voice called out from behind them. "Miss, you dropped this." Josephine turned to find a tall man holding her handkerchief. He stood at least 6 feet 4 inches, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His blue eyes regarded her with interest rather than judgment. "Thank you, Mr. Xander O'Brien. I own the Double Circle Ranch outside town." He handed her the handkerchief, his gaze never leaving her face. "You're new to White River?" Josephine Jameson. She took her handkerchief, noting how their hands were nearly the same size. "I was to be Mr. Blackstone's bride, but there's been a misunderstanding." Xander's eyes flicked to Blackstone, who shifted uncomfortably. "A misunderstanding." "Miss Jameson's stature is not what I anticipated," Blackstone said stiffly. "I require a wife of more conventional proportions." Something hardened in Xander's expression. "Seems to me the lady came a long way based on your invitation, Blackstone." "That may be, and now you're leaving her stranded with no arrangements," Blackstone bristled. "My requirements were quite specific." "Your requirements," Xander's voice lowered dangerously. "She's a woman, not a mare at auction." Josephine stepped between them. "Mr. O'Brien, while I appreciate your concern, Mr. Blackstone is within his rights. Our agreement was contingent upon mutual satisfaction." She turned to Blackstone. "I require only a recommendation for lodging until I can make other arrangements." Blackstone nodded curtly. "The White River Hotel should suffice. Good day, Miss Jameson." He tipped his hat and hurried away. Josephine blinked back tears of humiliation. She'd traveled nearly 2,000 miles to be rejected within minutes of arrival. "May I help with your trunk, Miss Jameson?" Xander asked, his voice gentler now. Thank you, but I can manage. She reached for the handle, but Xander was faster. I insist. The hotel's just down the street. He lifted her trunk effortlessly. Don't mind Blackstone, always was more concerned with appearances than substance. Josephine fell into step beside him, aware of the stares from townspeople. For once, she wasn't the only one being gawked at. Xander O'Brien commanded attention wherever he went. You're the first person I've met who doesn't have to strain their neck to speak to me, she said, attempting levity. He laughed, a rich sound that warmed her despite her circumstances. And you're the first woman I've met who doesn't make me feel like a giant among saplings. His expression grew serious. What will you do now? Return to Boston, I suppose, though there's nothing for me there. She straightened her shoulders. Perhaps I'll seek employment here until I can save enough for passage. They reached the hotel, where Xander set down her trunk and removed his hat. Miss Jameson, I don't mean to be forward, but I have a proposition for you. Josephine raised an eyebrow. Sir. Nothing improper, he assured her quickly. My ranch housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, is leaving to care for her daughter in Denver. I need someone to manage the household cooking, cleaning, bookkeeping. The position includes room and board plus wages. You're offering me employment? Yes. You'd have your own quarters in the main house. It's honest work, though not easy. Josephine considered. With no money for return passage and no prospects in Boston, what choice did she have? I accept your offer, Mr. O'Brien, though I must warn you my cooking skills are limited. Mrs. Abernathy can teach you before she leaves. He smiled. And please call me Xander, then I'm Josephine. No, he said, looking at her thoughtfully. You strike me as more of a Josie. No one had ever called her Josie before. It sounded friendly, approachable, everything she'd never been in Boston society. Josie, she repeated, testing the name. I like that, Xander grinned. Welcome to White River, Josie. We'll depart for the ranch tomorrow morning if that suits you. As he walked away, Josephine felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Perhaps Colorado would offer her a fresh start after all. The following morning, Xander arrived promptly at 8 with a wagon. Josephine had spent her meager savings on supplies, practical clothing, sturdy boots, and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her fair skin from the sun. She'd also purchased a journal, determined to document her new life. Good morning, Josie, Xander called, jumping down from the wagon. Ready for your new adventure? As ready as I'll ever be. She allowed him to help load her trunk, noting how easily they moved together. There was no awkwardness about her height, no careful avoidance of touching her. It was refreshing. The journey to the Double Circle Ranch took 2 hours. As they traveled, Xander pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory. He'd come to Colorado after the war, purchased a small plot of land, and built it into one of the most successful cattle operations in the county. It's not fancy, he warned as they approached a large 2-story house with a broad porch. But it's home. It's magnificent, Josephine breathed. After her cramped Boston apartment, the sprawling ranch house seemed palatial. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on lush pastures. Mrs. Abernathy greeted them at the door, a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. So you're the new housekeeper. At least you'll be able to reach the high shelves. She chuckled. Come along, I'll show you your duties. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of learning. Mrs. Abernathy taught Josephine to cook ranch-style meals, manage household accounts, and oversee the cleaning. Despite her initial concerns, Josephine proved a quick study by the time Mrs. Abernathy departed for Denver. Josephine felt reasonably confident in her new role. Her first solo dinner was a simple affair: beef stew, biscuits, and apple pie. She served Xander and his 3 ranch hands: Miguel, a Mexican cowboy with a quiet demeanor, Jeb, an older man who'd worked the ranch since its beginning, and Tom, a young cowboy eager to prove himself. This is delicious, Miss Josie, Tom said, helping himself to a second serving of stew. Indeed, Xander agreed. Mrs. Abernathy taught you well. Josephine blushed at the praise. In Boston, she'd rarely received compliments. Here, her skills were appreciated, her height merely a practical advantage for reaching high cupboards. As weeks passed, Josephine settled into ranch life. Her days took on a comfortable rhythm, rising before dawn to prepare breakfast, managing the household throughout the day, and often spending evenings on the porch with Xander, discussing books or simply enjoying the spectacular sunsets. On a crisp October evening, she found him there, staring pensively at the mountains. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, offering him a cup of coffee. "Thinking about winter," he replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "First snow will come soon. The cattle are fat and healthy, though. We should weather it well." Josephine settled into the chair beside him. "I've never experienced a Colorado winter. Is it very harsh?" "Can be. We might get snowed in for days sometimes." He glanced at her. "Will that bother you, being isolated?" "No," she answered honestly. "I've felt more at home here in weeks than I ever did in Boston." Xander studied her face. "Why did you become a mail-order bride, Josie? You're educated, well-spoken. Surely you had suitors in Boston." Josephine laughed without humor. "Gentlemen don't court women they have to look up to." "My height made me an oddity, Mr. O'Brien." "Xander," he corrected gently. "And that's nonsense. Any man worth his salt wouldn't care about something so trivial," says the man who stands taller than I do. She smiled to soften her words. "When my parents died, I had few options. Teaching positions were scarce, and I lacked skills for other employment. Becoming a mail-order bride seemed practical." "And now, do you regret it?" Josephine considered the question. "I regret that Mr. Blackstone rejected me so publicly, but had he not, I wouldn't be here now." She met his gaze. "So no, I don't regret it." Something shifted in Xander's eyes, a warmth that made Josephine's heart beat faster. Before he could respond, however, Miguel appeared with news of a sick calf, and the moment passed. That night, writing in her journal, Josephine confronted feelings she'd been avoiding. She was developing affection for Xander, inappropriate feelings for her employer. She resolved to maintain professional distance, protecting both her position and her heart. November brought the first snowfall, blanketing the ranch in white. Josephine awoke to find Xander and the men preparing for a cattle drive to the lower pastures. "We'll be gone overnight," Xander told her over breakfast. "Will you be all right here alone?" "I'll be fine," she assured him, packing provisions for their journey. "Please be careful." He hesitated, then reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that Josephine forgot to breathe. "Always," he promised, his voice rough. After they departed, Josephine threw herself into work, baking, mending, anything to distract from thoughts of Xander. When evening came, she found herself restless, worried about the men in the worsening weather. The storm intensified through the night. Wind howled around the house, rattling windows and driving snow against the glass. Josephine kept the fire burning high, anxiously watching for any sign of the men's return. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving 3 feet of snow and no sign of Xander or the ranch hands. Josephine paced anxiously, peering out windows for any movement on the horizon. When noon came with no return, she made a decision. Donning Xander's spare coat and her sturdiest boots, she saddled his gentlest mare and set out toward the lower pastures. She'd observed the men enough to have basic riding skills, though she'd never attempted a solo journey. The snow made travel difficult, but Josephine pressed on, guided by landmarks Xander had pointed out during their conversations. Her height proved an advantage, allowing her to see over snowdrifts and identify the path. She traveled perhaps 3 miles when she spotted movement ahead, a lone rider struggling through the snow. As she drew closer, relief flooded her. It was Xander, hunched in his saddle. "Xander." She called, urging her horse forward. He looked up, disbelief crossing his face. "Josie, what in God's name are you doing out here?" As she reached him, she saw he was clutching his arm, his face pale beneath his tan. "You're injured. Where are the others?" "Safe. We found shelter in a lined shack." "I came back for help. My arm's broken, and Tom's got a bad fever." He swayed slightly. "You shouldn't have come looking." "Nonsense. Can you ride back?" When he nodded, she continued, "Good. I'll help you to the house, then fetch the doctor from town." "Too dangerous," he protested. "I'm not asking permission," she replied firmly. "Now let's get you home." The return journey was slower, with Xander struggling to stay upright. By the time they reached the ranch house, his face was gray with pain. Josephine helped him inside, easing him into a chair near the fire. "Let me see your arm," she instructed, carefully removing his coat. The broken bone hadn't pierced the skin, but the unnatural angle made her wince. "I need to stabilize this before I go for the doctor." Using wooden spoons and strips torn from an old sheet, she fashioned a splint, working as gently as possible. Xander watched her face as she worked, his expression unreadable. "You're good at this," he said through gritted teeth. "My father was a physician. I assisted him occasionally." She finished the splint and helped him drink some water. "Now I'm going to town. You rest, Josie." He caught her hand. "Thank you." The ride to White River tested Josephine's endurance. Snow drifted belly high on the horse in places, and the cold seeped through her layers of clothing. When she finally reached town, the doctor was thankfully available. She also recruited 2 strong young men to help retrieve the stranded ranch hands. By evening, everyone was safely back at the ranch. The doctor had set Xander's arm properly, Tom's fever was responding to treatment, and Miguel and Jeb were helping Josephine prepare a hot meal. "Miss Josie saved the boss's life," Jeb told Miguel as they peeled potatoes. "Riding out alone in that snow, bravest thing I've seen in years." "I merely did what anyone would do," Josephine demurred, though privately she was proud of her actions. Later, after the others had gone to bed, she checked on Xander. He was propped up in bed, reading by lamplight despite the doctor's orders to rest. "You should be sleeping," she scolded gently. "Can't." He set aside his book. "Keep thinking about you riding out in that storm. You could have been lost, frozen to death. But I wasn't. I'm quite capable, you know. More than capable." His good hand caught hers. "Josie, when I saw you coming through that snow, I thought I was hallucinating. No one's ever risked themselves for me like that." Josephine sat on the edge of the bed. "You would have done the same for any of us." "Yes, but that's different. It's my responsibility as your employer." "Is that all you are to me, an employer?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Xander's eyes darkened. "What am I to you, Josie?" She couldn't answer, couldn't confess feelings that might cost her position, her home. Instead, she stood. "You need rest. We can talk tomorrow, Josie." His voice stopped her at the door. "Thank you for finding me today." She nodded and slipped out, her heart racing with unspoken words. The next week brought challenges as Josephine managed the ranch with Xander incapacitated. She not only maintained the household, but also helped with ranch accounts and made decisions about feed purchases. Xander watched her take charge with evident admiration. "You're a natural at this," he told her one evening as she reviewed ledgers at his bedside. "Most women would be overwhelmed." "Most women haven't had to fend for themselves as I have," she smiled wryly. "Being overlooked has its advantages. I learned to be self-sufficient." "I see you, Josie," he said quietly. "I have from the first day." The intensity in his gaze made her pulse quicken. Before she could respond, Tom knocked on the door with questions about the next day's work, and the moment was lost. As November gave way to December, Xander's arm healed enough for him to resume limited duties. Josephine found herself missing their quiet evenings together, the intimate conversations that had developed during his convalescence. Though they still shared meals and occasional discussions on the porch, something had changed. A wariness had entered their interactions. One afternoon, returning from gathering eggs, Josephine overheard Miguel and Jeb talking near the barn. "Boss is sweet on Miss Josie," Miguel said. "Never seen him look at a woman that way." "She feels the same," Jeb replied. "Question is, when will either of them admit it?" Josephine hurried past before they could notice her, cheeks burning. Was her attraction to Xander so obvious, and could the men be right about his feelings? She had little time to contemplate these questions. Christmas was approaching, and Josephine threw herself into preparations. She decorated the house with pine boughs and berries, baked traditional cookies from her mother's recipes, and secretly worked on gifts for everyone. For Xander, she embroidered handkerchiefs with his initials, adding a small design of mountains and pine trees. It was a modest gift, but crafted with care, and though she wouldn't admit it, love on Christmas Eve, snow fell gently outside while inside, the ranch house glowed with warmth and light. Josephine had prepared a feast: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and a rich plum pudding. The men ate heartily, complimenting her cooking with genuine enthusiasm. After dinner, they exchanged gifts. Josephine received practical items from the ranch: hands a new apron, a cookbook, warm gloves. When it came time for Xander's gift, he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. Josephine unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound copy of Wuthering Heights, a replacement for her worn edition. But when she opened the cover, she gasped. Inside was a delicate gold chain with a pendant shaped like a mountain range. "Xander, it's beautiful." She touched the pendant with trembling fingers, "but too extravagant, not for you." He took the necklace and moved behind her. "May I?" she nodded, lifting her hair as he fastened the chain around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, sending shivers down her spine. "Thank you," she whispered, turning to face him. Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, Josephine thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, clearing his throat. "Time for my gift," he said, his voice rough. Josephine presented the handkerchiefs, suddenly embarrassed by their simplicity compared to his generous gift. "I made them myself. I know it's not much. They're perfect." Xander traced the embroidered mountains. "No one's made something for me since my mother died. Thank you, Josie." The evening continued with songs around the fire and stories of Christmases past. When the ranch hands retired, Josephine and Xander remained, watching the dying embers. "I have something to ask you," Xander said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "The Cattle Association is hosting a New Year's dance in town. Would you accompany me?" Josephine stared at him. "As your housekeeper." "No," he met her gaze steadily. "As my companion, my date, if you will." Her heart raced. "People will talk. Let them." "I don't care what anyone thinks except you." He took her hand. "What do you say, Josie?" "Yes," she replied softly. "I'd be honored." The week leading up to the dance passed in a flurry of anticipation. Josephine altered her best dress, a deep blue wool that complemented her eyes, and arranged her hair in a more fashionable style. When the evening arrived, she found herself uncharacteristically nervous. "You look beautiful," Xander said when she descended the stairs. He stood tall and handsome in a black suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. "Thank you." She accepted his arm, noticing how perfectly they fit together, her height complementing his. The dance was held at the town hall, decorated with evergreen boughs and paper streamers. When they entered, conversation momentarily halted as people took in the striking couple. Josephine recognized curiosity, surprise, and in some cases, disapproval in the glances. "Ignore them," Xander murmured, leading her toward the refreshment table. "They're just jealous I'm escorting the most beautiful woman here." Josephine laughed, relaxing slightly. "Flatterer, merely truthful." They mingled with other ranchers and townspeople, including a frosty exchange with Howard Blackstone and his new wife, a diminutive woman who barely reached his shoulder. "Miss Jameson," Blackstone said stiffly, "I see you found employment, Mr. Blackstone." Josephine nodded politely. "Yes, I've been fortunate." "More than fortunate," Xander added, his hand possessive at her waist. "Josie has become indispensable to the double circle." When the orchestra struck up a waltz, Xander led Josephine to the dance floor. They moved together with surprising grace, her height allowing them to maintain perfect eye contact. "I've never danced with someone I didn't have to bend down for," Xander commented as they whirled around the floor. "It's refreshing." "I've never danced with someone who didn't have to strain to reach my waist," she countered with a smile. "You're right, it is refreshing." As the evening progressed, Josephine noticed other dancers giving them a wide berth, whispering behind fans and hands. When Xander excused himself to speak with a cattle buyer, she overheard two women talking nearby. "Can you imagine, dancing with your housekeeper? And such an ungainly woman, like watching a man in skirts." Josephine's cheeks burned with humiliation. For a moment, she was transported back to Boston drawing rooms where she'd endured similar barbs. She was considering slipping outside for air when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Miss Jameson." She turned to find Howard Blackstone's wife, Emily, looking up at her with unexpected kindness. Mrs. Blackstone, I wanted to apologize for my husband's behavior both now and when you arrived. The small woman twisted her handkerchief nervously. It was unkind and you deserved better. Surprised, Josephine replied, "Thank you, but no apology is necessary." "It is, and—" Emily glanced around before continuing in a low voice. "I think Mr. O'Brien is a far better match for you. Anyone can see how he looks at you like you're the answer to a prayer he didn't know he'd made." Before Josephine could respond, Xander returned, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. "Everything all right here? Perfectly fine," Josephine assured him. "Mrs. Blackstone was just being kind." As the clock approached midnight, Xander led Josephine outside to the town square where a light snow was falling. They weren't alone, other couples had the same idea, but there was a sense of privacy in the darkness. "Cold?" he asked, noticing her slight shiver. "A little." She smiled up at him. "But I don't mind." He removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "Better. Much, though now you'll freeze. I run hot." His eyes held hers. "Josie, there's something I need to say before the new year begins." Her heart quickened. "Yes." "When you came to White River, I thought you were just passing through someone who'd move on once she found her footing, but these past months—" He took both her hands in his. "You've become essential to me, not as my housekeeper, but as the woman who makes my house a home." Josephine's throat tightened with emotion. "Xander, let me finish. I know there are obstacles. You work for me, society has expectations about appropriate matches, but I don't care about any of that. I care about you." He stepped closer. "I'm in love with you, Josie." The words she'd longed to hear hung in the snowy air between them. "When Mr. Blackstone rejected me," she said softly, "I thought my height would always be an impediment to finding love, that I was too tall, too awkward, too much." "You're perfect," Xander interrupted fiercely. "The perfect height to look me in the eye when we argue." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "The perfect height to kiss without straining my neck." From the town hall came the sounds of counting down to midnight. 10, 9, 8. "I love you too," Josephine whispered. 3, 2, 1. As cheers erupted to welcome 1876, Xander lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. Josephine melted against him, years of insecurity dissolving in the certainty of his embrace. When they finally parted, snow dusting their hair and shoulders, Xander rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Josie, not as a mail-order arrangement, not out of practicality, but because we belong together." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes." The next morning, they announced their engagement to the ranch hands, who received the news with knowing smiles and hearty congratulations. "About time, boss," Jeb said, slapping Xander on the back. "We was wondering when you'd come to your senses." "Miss Josie," Miguel added, "you will make a fine rancher's wife." They planned a spring wedding, allowing time for Josephine's one remaining relative and aunt in Philadelphia to travel west. In the meantime, Josephine moved her belongings to the small cabin originally built for the ranch foreman, preserving proprieties until their marriage. Winter gradually released its grip on the land. As March brought the first hints of green to the pastures, Josephine and Xander settled into a new rhythm, partners now in planning their future together. "We should expand the house," Xander suggested one evening as they reviewed ranch improvements. "Add a proper library for your books, maybe a music room." "And a nursery," Josephine added tentatively. Xander's eyes lit up. "You want children? Very much. Though I worry they'll inherit my height. Girls especially, it's not easy being tall in a world that values petite women." He took her hand. "Our daughters will be magnificent, just like their mother, and they'll grow up knowing their height is an advantage, not a liability." "How did I find someone who sees me so clearly?" she wondered aloud. "We found each other," he corrected. "And I thank God every day for Howard Blackstone's short-sightedness, literally and figuratively." April arrived with an explosion of wildflowers and wedding preparations. The entire ranch was scrubbed and polished, and Josephine's Aunt Margaret arrived, bringing a wedding gift, the lace veil Josephine's mother had worn at her own wedding. "Your mother would be so proud," Aunt Margaret said, watching Josephine try on her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation in ivory satin. She always said your height was regal. I see now she was right. The wedding day dawned clear and warm. Ranchers and townspeople gathered at White River's small church, curiosity about the unusual couple bringing even those who'd gossiped about them. Josephine wore her mother's veil with her new dress, and at her throat, Xander's Christmas gift, the mountain pendant that symbolized their shared love of this wild, beautiful land. When the music began, Josephine walked alone down the aisle, her head high. At the altar, Xander waited, tall and proud in his best suit. Their eyes met and held, communicating a depth of emotion words couldn't express. Dearly beloved, the minister began, but it was their personal vows that moved the congregation to tears. Josie, Xander said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, when you stepped off that stagecoach, standing tall despite the stares and whispers, I knew you were someone exceptional. You've brought warmth to my home, purpose to my days, and love to a heart I thought would always be solitary. I promise to cherish your strength, respect your wisdom, and love you completely for all our days. Josephine blinked back tears. Xander, you saw me when others looked away. You valued me for qualities others dismissed. With you, I'm never too tall, too outspoken, or too much. I'm simply, wonderfully myself. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face whatever comes with the same courage that brought me west, and to love you with all that I am for all the days were granted. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xander swept Josephine into an embrace that lifted her off her feet, much to the delight of the guests. The celebration continued at the double circle, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and music provided by local musicians. Even Howard Blackstone approached to offer congratulations, his manner stiff but sincere. You've made a fine match, Miss Jameson, Mrs. O'Brien, that is. Thank you, Mr. Blackstone, Josephine smiled warmly. I believe everything happened exactly as it should have. As evening fell, lanterns illuminated the ranch yard, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Xander led Josephine in their first dance as husband and wife, moving with the same perfect synchrony they'd discovered at the New Year's ball. Happy, Mrs. O'Brien, he murmured against her ear. Completely, she rested her cheek against his, savoring the moment, though I'll miss dancing with you when I'm enormous with child. He pulled back slightly to see her face. Are you saying? She nodded, a secret smile curving her lips. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We'll welcome our first child before Christmas. Joy transformed Xander's face. He spun her around, heedless of the other dancers, then kissed her thoroughly. When they parted, breathless, the entire gathering was watching them with indulgent smiles. Everyone will know now, Josephine whispered, blushing. Good, Xander grinned. Let them know how happy we are. Later that night, alone in their bedroom now truly theirs, Xander helped Josephine remove the pins from her hair, watching as the auburn waves cascaded down her back. I never thought I'd find someone like you, he said, running his fingers through the silken strands. Someone who fits me so perfectly. We do fit perfectly, don't we? She turned in his arms. In every way that matters, in every way. He kissed her softly, then with increasing passion, until the rest of the world faded away, leaving only their love and the promise of the future they would build together. In the years that followed, the double circle prospered under their joint stewardship. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived on a snowy December night in 1876. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 18 months later, and another son, William, 2 years after that. True to their expectations, Elizabeth inherited her parents' height, standing nearly 6 feet tall by her 16th birthday. But unlike her mother's experience, Elizabeth grew up seeing her height as an asset, encouraged by parents who valued strength and capability over conventional standards of femininity. As for Josephine and Xander, their love deepened with each passing year. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on their porch, watching their children play in the twilight. Xander's arm encircled Josephine's waist, pulling her close against him. Any regrets? He asked. About coming west, about the life we've built. Josephine considered the question, thinking of the frightened young woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach a decade earlier rejected. humiliated, uncertain of her future. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Everything led me here, to you, to our children, to this land I've come to love." "How could I regret any of it, even Howard Blackstone?" Xander teased, "especially Howard Blackstone." She laughed, turning in his arms to face him. "His rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me." "To us both," Xander agreed, lowering his mouth to hers in a kiss as passionate as their first. As twilight deepened into night, Josephine reflected on how far she had come from that uncertain arrival in White River. The mail-order bride rejected for being too tall had found not just acceptance but celebration of her stature. Not just a home but a true belonging, and not just a husband but a partner who saw her exactly as she was perfect.